And here's the thing. 3 years ago in these meetings, and nobody was talking about the pension. Everyone kind of knew it should be getting talked about. Nobody was talking about it. They're all talking about it now. They're all mad. They're mad at me for bringing it up. Legislators are mad at me. The people are mad at me. I'm just the guy pointing out that the emperor's naked. I'm not a good guy for doing this. This is one of the things I said when I was in this room years ago. I'm trying to save this system. And the only way you save it is to stop feeding the decline. Future people cannot be given the same thing that past people were. You just can't. We know the money's not there to do it. Let me give you an example. KERS non-hazardous. I won't ask you to raise your hands if you're in that plan, but I bet some of you. And if you are in KERS non-hazardous and you're worried for your pension, you should be. Because it is in horrific shape. For every dollar that it owes to someone, there's 12 cents in there. 12 cents. The PBGC, private sector, quasi-governmental entity, it's like the FDIC. It sort of insures pension plans in the private sector. It stands for the Pension Benefit Guarantee. And the PBGC steps in the private sector and seizes private sector plans when they fall below a level that is considered unsustainable. That level is 80%. When they fall below 80% funded, they're considered to be failing. And between there and 65 is when they take them over. They seize them, they shut them down, they pay people out at best about 15 cents on the dollar. If you worked for Acme Corporation and had a pension plan that was failing, PBGC would step in, they'd pay you 15 cents on the dollar of what you thought you were going to get at best. And then it's over. Guess what? There's no money there. That's all you get. There's no equivalent for that in the public sector. And so you have these things devolving downward. And I hear people in KTRS, in CERS, two of the better funded plans at about 54, 5, 6, 7%, somewhere between 55 and 60% or so. And those are some of the better funded plans. People say, well, not as bad as KERS non-hazardous. They're 12%. They're in bad shape, but we're doing great. Look how well we're funded. Are you kidding me? Who was also 54, 5, 6, 7, 8% just 10 years ago? KERS non-hazardous. Why? Because of this. A defined benefit plan. And this is something that when people ask you, well, how did this happen? How did we not see it? A defined benefit plan, forgive me if I'm telling you something you know, but it's like Social Security in some measure in that people say, well, I put my money in, I want to get it out. You're not getting your own money out. The very first retired out of these plans didn't work 20 or 30 years. They happened to be there when the plan was set up and they got to retire. Why? Because all these people are still paying in. And when you had 25, 30 people paying in for everyone that was retired, it worked. What great. You're working for the benefit that's been defined, but the benefit is for this person who's up here at the retirement level. It is being paid for by all these people down here. Most of y'all are my age, second half century, and so this is the wrong question to ask. But people younger than us, you ask them how confident that they are that they're going to see Social Security. They're not very confident, and for good reason. But here's what's crazy. There's still 3.5 people paying into Social Security for everyone that's retired. When it was set up, it was about 30 to 1. Now it's probably even more than that. But it normalized quick, and it was dozens to 1. It's now 3.5 paying in for everybody that's retired. But here's what's crazy. 2.5. This is 2.5 now? Okay, I stand corrected. It's shrinking. But my point is, it's been doing this. Well, guess what it is in Kentucky? For everybody that's retired in Kentucky, there's less than one person working. And nobody believes Social Security is going to work. It's collapsing. Well, we've already collapsed. We've inverted. What was supposed to be a pyramid of people working to pay, and had it always been properly maintained and we'd used proper assumptions, it might have worked, but we overpromised in all the ways we were just talking about. So it really couldn't work because we promised more than any amount of paying in would have provided. But the point being is that as it has gone like this, it has gone from being a pyramid to a wedge, and it is inverted. It's literally driving itself into oblivion. It is 100% financially, actuarially, economically, statistically impossible for it to pay what has been promised to those of you that raised your hands and the hundreds of thousands. It is impossible. The money is not there, and it's never going to reappear. The only way it happens is when our kids and grandkids, and us to a degree, over the next decades, will pay it off. The only way to even have a shot at doing that is to know how much it is, which means you don't keep promising future employees the same thing. Because if you do, then the pit is bottomless, and it will only get deeper. You got to freeze this for future employees. Then you know how much it is, and it's about $60 some odd billion, which is a lot.
How can these people resist every idea that you've had? It seems like the folks in the retirement system, instead of marching in the Capitol and tearing it up, they should be up there applauding you for saving their retirement.
But understand something. Here's why. Most of the people, the only people doing any marching, are being fed a load of baloney. And the reason they're being fed a load of baloney is because this isn't about what's best for even those individuals. It's about who gets to control their dues and who gets power politically for being able to spend that dues money. The KEA is straight out lying to their own members about what is at stake. They're telling them it's all good, don't worry, the state's got your back. Well, the state doesn't, because the state can only get money from two places. We can only borrow it, which is one of the worst credit rated states in America, and at the cost of what it is when you have low credit rating. We couldn't even begin to borrow the money we owe. The only other way you can get it is to tax people more. And guess what? This isn't East Berlin. If you tax someone too much, where do they go? Maybe Tennessee if they don't want to go far. Maybe Florida or Texas if they don't care about going. Where do they go? This is a room full of people with gray hair. Okay, so let me ask you this question. I won't ask you to raise your hand, but I would be shocked if not everyone in here knows at least one person who is a resident of Florida for 6 months in a day. Why? Because they're crazy to die in this state if they have the ability to plan ahead. If in a free market, in a free country, if you don't have an attractive tax base and approach, people will leave. What I'm trying to do is right this ship without capsizing it. And it's not an easy task. There's a lot of misinformation. Most of what is driven, there are people intentionally feeding lies and misinformation. Most of the angst and most of the marching and most of the vitriol is coming out of fear and confusion. It really is. And understand this too. There's 125,000 people on the pension front, just among the teachers who are some of the more vocal, it would seem. But there's 125,000 active or retired teachers, even more than that in KTROs. But of those 125, I would say there's probably a few hundred that are regularly unloading on social media. If you look, they'll be the same people over and over and over. There's a few hundred. They come and go, but there's probably a few hundred. Of those that are willing to do more than just occasionally unload on social media, might even show up and parade and make signs or what have you, there might be 3,000, maybe 5,000 tops, but they've never all shown up at one time. Let's just say if they could, there might be 5,000. 5,000 out of 125,000. It seems like a lot when that's all you hear. It could be 5 and the Courier Journal would pretend it was 5,000. My point being, it is a real number, and those are real people, and they have real angst, and this is a real country. We have real freedom of expression, and it's their right to do so. But they don't even speak for those they pretend to speak for, which are their own peers. For every one of those, every 5, there's 120 others whose mouths are shut, who are not on social media at 3 o'clock and ripping people a new one, aren't calling in sick and pretending they're sick when they're not, who actually care about doing their job, and who are voting accordingly. Because I would not be the governor if that was not the case. We would not in 2016 have won the legislature if that was not the case. We would not in 2018, when everyone was going to remember in November, and pack them all up, not only maintain the House, but pick up seats in the Senate, still having supermajorities, if in fact all those noisy people actually spoke for where people were. So I would take comfort in the fact that they are real opinions and there are really noisy, angry people. But they're very few by comparison to the alternative. The thoughtful ones among them know they're in big trouble and are actually grateful somebody's at least elevated this up. They're not going to come out and say thank you any more than they're going to put a Donald Trump bumper sticker on their car. But they're still secretly glad it's him and not Hillary Clinton.
You mentioned the woman that was hanging out boxes earlier that had, 20, 25, 30 years in state government.
You know, which guy was this? I'm sorry. Yes, exactly. I'm sorry. Probably to him at this point.
We have state employees. State employees who are
in prison who are getting pensions.
30 years, and they're the ones that are getting that 60,000. Is there any way to change that?
Yeah, the legislature. They're the only people that can do it. But then you start there, then maybe someone will talk about their pension. Why, when you work 30 days one year and 60 days the next year, do you get a pension from the people of Kentucky? I'm serious. In fairness, seriously, they do work more than just those 30 days. They have other committee meetings, and they work hard. And I'm not disparaging, but if you want to be a publicly elected official, you should not be doing it to get a pension. If you want to be a state employee and work your whole life, you should get something in exchange. In some form or fashion, that's the way you should expect it to work. As the people paying, even if we're not the public employees, should be comfortable with that because we're getting law enforcement, we're getting educators, we're getting highway road plowers and things of this sort. We're getting something, and we should be willing to exchange our tax dollars for it. But if you want to run for elected office and expect to then get a pension for the rest of your life, come on. That's not the kind of public service that we need. That's not what citizen legislation is meant to be. And the only people that can change this are the 138 men and women. And it's interesting, too, because you can come back. We got one of our dear friends from days past, Greg Stumbo, is now running to be your next attorney general. And Greg already is retired from the state. You know how much he makes every year right now that you're paying for? 92,000, 90 something, somewhere south of 95 every year. And even if he comes back and becomes your next attorney general, he'll get his 100 and whatever thousand he gets for that, plus his 97,000, and he'll get it for the rest of his life, plus health care. It's a good gig. It's a racket.
I would like to know, let's go a little deeper on this tax issue. I noticed that quite a few of them for the hemp, marijuana, and we already know what happened in Colorado and the other states. I understand that there's a lot of people against it, and really I am too, because I believe it's going to bring out more. Do you know we have a new drug in Louisville, Kentucky that's really showing up called Flocka? And it's come from Florida, and I've done run into several out in this end of town. Saved a life a few weeks ago. So I'm just wondering about this issue that's coming up. There's so many for it and so many against it.
Sure. Let me touch on that. It's a good question. Agree with me if you want to or not. But I will say this. Hemp and marijuana are two very different animals.
Yes.
They are related, but they really are two very different animals. Hemp is a cash crop that has a tremendous amount of value that can be derived from it. Not only its fiber, but its oils and 1,000 other derivations of it that make it a remarkably good cash crop for Kentucky. Just our soil, our seasons, and everything else lend this part of the country to be more likely to produce it well than other places, and we're crazy if we don't. It's highly in demand in the country and in the world. And so I'm glad for the fact that that has been decriminalized. It used to be rolled in because it is a varietal of the very same plant that is marijuana. You would have to smoke a bale of it to be able to get the THC equivalent of what you would get in marijuana itself. Marijuana is a very different animal. They're both a derivation of cannabis, but really cannabis we think of as marijuana has the higher levels of THC. Certainly not going to ask you all to raise your hand, but I'm willing to bet someone in this room has probably experimented at some point in their life with some varietal of THC. What is now passing for marijuana is so different than it was even 10 years ago, let alone 50. These strains are so potent, and they are being increasingly laced with other things, whether it's Flocka or whether in some instances literally fentanyl, carfentanil being laced into marijuana for reasons that are hard for me to understand. So people are literally dying for things that they didn't realize they were taking. But the question that was at the heart of what you asked is this really an answer financially for some of the things that ail us? Let me give you a quick example. You hear people talk about, let's recreationally approve marijuana. Even though it is illegal, other states have done it, so maybe we could do it too. And those that are proponents of recreational marijuana being legalized have said we could make $100 million a year in taxes from that. And maybe we could. Usually when people are trying to drum something up, they kind of over-exaggerate a little bit of potential, but let's just say they're not. It's possible if we all smoked enough of it that maybe everybody could make $100 million. Let's say you could. Seriously, let's say you could get $100 million. If we take a look at our current unfunded pension liability, people say that's how you fix the pension crisis. Let's do the math on it. If you take 100% of the proceeds from legalizing recreational marijuana and you put it toward paying down our tax liability or our pension liability, how many of you lived here in Kentucky for 30 years or more? Most of you. Okay, great. So you remember when the lottery came in. The lottery came in 30 years ago. What was the purpose of it? It was supposed to fund education. How many of you are 100% confident that all the money's gone to education?
No way.
It has for the last 3 years. I'm the only governor in the history of Kentucky that's put 100% of the money in education. No more deserve thanks for that than I do for not stealing your wallet. In all seriousness, that's what it's supposed to do, so that's why I do it. We have people in law enforcement and retired law enforcement in this room. The cleft fund, 100% of the cleft money is supposed to go to law enforcement, but it never has. And the previous governor took $117 million out of the cleft fund. Law enforcement officers didn't get a certification for their certification, their training. For 21 years, they didn't get any increase. Meanwhile, we were taking hundreds of millions of dollars out of that account. We, the state, other governors. I'm the only governor that has ever been alive, frankly, including while any of you were alive or before that, although these funds didn't predate you all. But cleft in lottery funds, I'm the only governor that's put 100% of those proceeds into what they're supposed to ever since I've been elected. So back to this, though. The odds that we would have a dedicated thing that some future governor and legislature is not going to touch is preposterous. But let's just say they were forced to never touch it. And we put 100% of that $100 million into fixing the pension crisis. We have conservatively, as I said, about a $60 billion or more unfunded liability. That would mean every single one of us would have to smoke as much pot as we possibly could, pay for it, for the next 600 years. Okay? And then, bear in mind, no one's allowed to retire during the next 600 years. Interest has to freeze. We're not going to accrue any interest on current unfunded liability. So no additional interest, no additional retirees, no additional liability, and all of us smoking as much as we can for the next 600 years in order to get to the amount we currently owe right now and don't already have. So it's not an answer. Some have stood here perhaps in front of you and told you that's their solution. It's baloney. It's not the solution. It's not even close. And people say, well, you can't do just that. You need casinos. Because we could get money from casinos. We could get $200 million a year is the number I've heard most often from those who are purporting that that's the answer. So let's say, okay, great. $200 million a year. Again, assuming it will never get touched for anything else. That means we all have to gamble as much as we can and nobody can retire and no interest can accrue for 300 years. But if you want to smoke pot and gamble at the same time, then it will only take 200 years. It doesn't make sense. That's just simple, basic math. That isn't even close to a solution for what else?
They're just blowing smoke.
They are blowing smoke, and it's of a particular variety. The only solution is we need more people living here paying taxes. It is impossible to squeeze those that are already here, a little more here and a little more there. Think about the idiocy of this, too. Where does the pot smoking, gambling money mostly come from? The very same people that are already on the hook for this money and don't have it. It's this sort of oddly vicious cycle that's not likely to trend in an upward direction. And it's to assume that there's zero negative societal cost, which is a ridiculous assumption in its own right. So pretending there's no societal cost, just the financial story alone, 75 years ago, and there's people in this room that were alive 75 years ago. I'm guessing a few. At the end of World War II, Tennessee, Kentucky, and Indiana were all just about the same population. We were actually slightly larger than one, slightly smaller than the other. We're all about the exact same. We are now 4.5 million people. They're both between 6 and 7 million people. Why? Better policies, better taxes, better leadership, better politics. Not always, but in recent years, yes, last 10, 12, 15 in particular, both of them have zigged while we have continued to zag. They've been better for it. They've seen a lot of that exponential growth happen in the last 20, 25 years. When I moved here 20 years ago, there was not much a lick worth of difference. And when I was stationed here just down the road in Fort Knox 29 years ago, there was no difference between Louisville, Nashville, and Indianapolis. I'm telling you, there really wasn't. In terms of size, in terms of economic prosperity, in terms of tax base. The only way we're going to fix this is to have better policy that will then attract people to live here, because with all due respect to Indiana and with all due respect to Tennessee, we're better. We are. And not just blowing smoke because we're from here. They have more extremes of weather in both directions. They have less arable land. They have less infrastructure with highways, riverways, roadways, less logistical advantages than we do. On many fronts, we are poised with so much more upside potential, but they have been eating our lunch because of better policies. And not even remarkably better policies, just slightly better policies that over time make the difference between 6.5 million people and 4.5 million people. And imagine if we had 2 million more people in this state, which over the next generation we could. And if we had 2 million, certainly over the next 2 generations, we could easily. Imagine if we had 2 million more people and just 30% of them paid taxes, 600,000 taxpayers. That's how you pay this stuff off.
Well, if our mayor would have got them taxes, I've heard a lot of people wanting to leave Louisville. And
I had a conversation with him today because he and I were together at something, and I told him, I said, listen, just between you and I, apparently it's now between you and I. It wasn't. Again, I've known Greg a long time. I said to him, you know that's not the right answer. I encouraged him to consider Mayor Gordon in Lexington. She's cutting 15% of her budget. Do you think that makes her pop? She's a brand new first-term mayor. Trust me, I know from personal experience. You come in and start cutting stuff, everybody gets all worked up. It's the right thing to do. That's what I told him. I said, the answer is not just to stick it to the people that are all inside. I said, because what I don't think you appreciate is how many people who can, not all of them can, but those that can, take their business to Oldham County or Shelby are going to do it. And they're already looking at you, oh, no, they're not. I'm telling you as a friend, rethink that. He doesn't believe it because he doesn't want to believe it. But we do have a lot of bike paths.
The mayor doesn't understand the percentages of how many people live in Bullitt County, Oldham County, Spencer County, Shelby County.
Who used to live here in the last 5 years.
That number 25% or more.
This is what you're talking about right here, but it's the right way and wrong way. For the folks in the room that don't know it, I thought it was just numbers and probably Jackson and body over here. Mayor Fisher is not very fair in how he cuts anything.
you got it.
Right.
No,
The reason you're standing right on the ground where we solidified the Republican candidates in Metro Louisville and brought these districts to them. They won out here. He knows it. He knows more about these precincts than we know. And he's cut both of the golf courses. He's already made that decision.
Yeah.
They're only
Yeah,
trying to
Think about this, and you think that's not being intentionally punitive? Come on. Trying to make class warfare between this group and the people he's trying to squeeze.
We don't even love him though. He ain't seen all the love we don't get.
We just elected him by 2-1. Not even out here. I don't mean we. There's none so blind as those that do not see. And sometimes they don't see because they don't want to see. Sometimes they don't see because they just don't see. This is where I'll come back to where we started. And I think I'm about to get done with all this. But thank you for sounding the alarm. Because I'll finish with one more final, not really preaching, but kind of.
I'm not rushing you,
If you think about this, think about the old truism behind the watchman on the wall. Go back and read Ezekiel. The watchman on the wall has a responsibility. And that is, if you see what's out there, you're expected to sound the alarm. And if you don't, it's on the watchman. It really is. It's more than just a biblical or a scriptural or a proverbial thing. It's true in life. It's true in the history of humanity. That people who see what's coming and don't do something, alert people to sound the alarm, whether you're a Paul Revere riding a horse, whether you're a whatever. If you don't do it, it's on you. And from a spiritual and eternal perspective, those who have that faith believe with confidence that they'll be held responsible for not stepping up. I applaud you for being people who, at least on the political front, and with a perspective that's broader than that, are people who step up. Because this is what makes the difference. There's too many sheep in the world. And I appreciate you all being shepherds because we need more.
Can we ask?
Ask you something. We're about to revamp our roster and what they're teaching in our school because in my granddaughter's school, they're teaching Hinduism, Hammurabi Code, Iqbal Muhammad, this Islam stuff. What they're teaching is off the chain.
It's starting to change. Nothing happens quickly. We have an entirely new Board of Education. And trust me, if they came in here one after the next, you wouldn't agree with every single thing every single one of them said, but you would be blown away at how much you agree with how they think. Because their principal focus is on how we best educate our kids. They're all new. It took me 3 years before I had actually appointed all of the different new members of the Board of Education. And Wayne Lewis, while not a perfect person, nor is any of us, is a remarkable individual. He really is. He has a tremendous focus on doing right by kids. Some of those same things I studied when I was a kid. The danger is not in learning about other things. It's the things we're intentionally not teaching. That's my big concern. I don't care if a kid learns Hammurabi Code or, in fact, I want them. The key is, what are we intentionally removing? Pretending was not our true history. That's the danger. When you pretend what did happen, didn't. Maybe it was those things that got us where we are. Silliness. We owe it to our kids to truly teach history. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Plenty of all. Plenty of good, plenty of bad, plenty of ugly. But if you don't know where you came from, you are destined to return to the worst elements of where you came from. And so to that end, one of the two things we are doing now, be able to graduate starting this next year in high school. Some of this has already been implemented, but it will be statewide. You will have to take a basic financial literacy courses. And this will be for a few kids that are on IEPs and don't have it. There's kids for kids that are in traditional paths of education. Financial literacy and citizenship will be required to take the same 100 question test that a new citizen is required to pass to become a citizen. But the point is this. We want kids to know the greatness of this country. And they should know no less about this country in our form of government than do people who want to be citizens here. So those are basic things. Those are not going to fix all the nails. Those are questions deeper than that. It's better than I've given it an answer for, given the time. But I'm telling you, this Board of Education that selects your Commissioner of Education is a whole sight better than it was 1, 2, and 3 years ago. A whole sight better. And it's going to take time, but it's starting to turn. And the guy who's the chair of that Board of Education is a man who is known to some of you, Hal Heiner. He's a man who has been passionate about this, selected as the board chair by the others who recognize that he best espouses what they all think. So it will change. It will not change quickly or quickly enough for many of us, but it is turning and in the right direction.
Okay, what about the time?
Glad you mentioned it. I was down at Fort Knox yesterday. I was literally inside the school system there, looking at their ROTCs. And it's interesting. Actually, the ROTC program down at Fort Knox, at the high school there, they have their own firing range. It's probably the only one in the country, actually. It's a residual of what's left over, but it's awesome. It's amazing. Their ROTC literally has an indoor firing range. But what I am working with my Director of Veterans Affairs, he's not my Director of Veterans Affairs. He's my liaison. He's a retired military colonel from Fort Knox. Liaison to the workforce community. His name is Blaine Hedges. What I have challenged him with, among others, is that I want an ROTC detachment to be in a program to be in every high school in Kentucky. Now, it won't be in everyone. We won't force it to be, but I want it to be available, and I think it's possible. There will be some local districts, including some a bit up the road here, who probably will intentionally not want it. That's okay, but many will. For all those who could and would want it, we should make sure we find the resources to make it available. There's over 340,000 veterans, 7,000 who are fully retired out of careers in the military. We've got plenty of people that could step up and help to teach and instruct. I agree with you 100%. Yeah, 100%. So we're working to actually broaden.
It was probably 4 years, I can't remember, or do remember. One of the popular things was vocational school program. We had one at Fairdale, we had one at Dietrich, and at Aaron's, and PRP, which was to help people develop trades in plumbing. Paraphrase Judge Mail's World Needs Ditch Diggers too. But I read an article in the Wall Street Journal several years ago where a welder can make something $100,000 a year. Since we're a basketball season. And interestingly enough, the biggest scandal in Michigan at Michigan basketball was caused by a booth who was not a lawyer, not a doctor, but an electrician at Ford Motor.